Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to some more Warpforge. It's been a little quiet around the channel, but also just kind of around Warpforge these days. But now we're gearing up for our next confirmed reinforcement batch, which we're going to get a bunch of information from some really great content creators with BJ the Brave and the Ecclesiarch today. So hopefully you're able to tune into that. I'm hoping to release my video today. And check out what these new orc cards are. Yes, that is the next reinforcement. I believe we'll have kind of a similar thing. New warlord, new units, all that good stuff. So I'm actually going to be switching over to collecting some orc points so I can start seeing if I can crack some packs and get a little lucky. But we're actually here to check in on a couple of things. Things have been really slow on my channel. For a bunch of reasons, but I've been really thinking about making this video for a while, so I'm really excited. Before I jump into that, if you do like the content, and I know it's been a bit sporadic these days, feel free to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. So, real quick, because I would be kind of remiss to not talk about this, the new patch has been live for, I think it's probably about a week at this point, maybe a little longer, balancing and specifically targeting the Goth Orcs and the Imotekh Dynasty with quite a few nerfs. A buff to the Eldari, and then a lot of different buffs to High Fleet Leviathan for the Tyranids, mostly to cards that don't see a ton of play, but there is one I definitely want to check in on. So this is not going to be a full patch video. These are the notes. You can go look at them. But baseline, Orcs have kind of across the board been pretty strong, so I think it's... I don't know that we needed all these changes, but I think the Rock Invasion change means that it's not just basically a I win on the spot button. It's a little bit changed, right? The fact that they're infantry 4 or less means that you're not going to hit 7, or not 7, but I think I've hit like 3 or 4 Ardshell Gurks, which is like the huge Vanguard unit that you can't really do anything to. That essentially says you win the game, right? Once you cast that. So I think that was probably a good change. I think Green Horde slowing down is like kind of hit or miss. I don't really feel like orcs combo off that much anymore. I still think it's a relatively strong card and enables some really crazy high rolls, but I think they've just been very consistent in what they can do. They haven't really needed to rely so much on Green Horde. So just wanted to talk about those. Also, I like the change to Spanner. I think that Spanner has been nerfed twice now, if I'm not mistaken. Can be really crazy. Imotekh Dynasty, we've just got some number changes across the board, which is probably helpful. Toonblade, a little less potent, fighting in the air. Lichguard getting a little less health, right? Makes it, that you don't get soft locked out of the game when they can just keep resurrecting it, right? If it's easier to clear. We've got some numbers changes also to Scarabs and Artifice with Hexmark Destroyer. And then Tomb World is going to 9, which gives you a little bit more time to close out the game against the Necrons, which for the deck we're discussing today is really, really important because that's a very, very challenging matchup. And then we've got a pretty notable change actually to Simhan, or Simhan. Not sure if that's how you pronounce it. With the Striking Scorpions getting +1 health, which, if you know and you've been playing Ultramarines, it's really easy to clear Striking Scorpion without having to interact with it. Now it gets a little harder, and I think that's a pretty noteworthy change. And then I would say the most noteworthy change here, and this goes to another tough matchup for this deck that we'll talk about today. Infinite Biomorphologies reduced cost from 3 to 2. And for those who don't know, and we'll see a great example of it, Swarmlord kind of is the premier Tyranid warlord, and there are a lot of reasons for that, and we'll talk about that later. But being able to cast Biomorphologies on your first or second turn when you're not really developing, because that's kind of how that deck works, is it sort of just keeps punching you and then develops a little later. Being able to just choose a buff for all the units in your hand, and you're hard mulliganing for units anyway when you're playing Tyranids, and then getting the stratagems later. This is definitely a buff, so we'll get to actually see a little bit of that showcased in the video today. So what are we here to do? We'll see which title I land on, but basically I wanted to call this something like, how do you play Ultramarines? Like, what I think the best strategy. And really, since the Uriel buffs, I've just completely sign on to the fact that I think that this is the best way to play Ultramarines. I love Varro. I love Calgar. I'm a big Ultramarines fan, as you guys know on this channel. But I think Ultramarines have been pushed a little bit more towards the aggressive end of the spectrum, which is, I don't really mind. I played aggro a lot in Magic the Gathering as well. And I just think that at this point, I don't know, I kind of just want to throw in the towel on the whole, like, go big vehicle strategy with Calgar and with Varro kind of being this mid-range leader, and Varro kind of, or rather, and Calgar having the card draw and the extra health. I used to really think that that was kind of the way to go. And maybe there are builds that are better that I haven't tried, but I just think that Uriel now has the tools that Space Marines have needed to be an aggressive kind of curve out deck. And they really were in a very awkward space, I think, until the buffs came through. So just to give a little context, and to preview what we're going to get into today, given that we went over the patch and just some of the upcoming fun news. So I think we'll probably have a bit more content coming in. Well, I say that every time, so, you know, if I'm being honest, we'll see when I get to it, but I appreciate you guys sticking with it. I want to talk about what I think is the best, Ultramarines deck to play. I want to talk about matchups. We're going to go into some game logs today, so it might be a little bit of a longer video. We'll see. And then we'll kind of break it down. But just to give, like I was starting to say, some context, we're basically at the bottom of the leaderboard now. We're not on it yet. So I think it starts at like 3,300, something like that. I just started climbing a couple days ago, and I've been doing only person matches, no bot matches. And it's been a pretty smooth climb for the most part, just because I feel like I've gotten as close as I can to kind of mastering this deck. Now, I will say, as of the games I was playing the other day, I did not have the Librarian, which I think is a pretty big addition to the deck that I just didn't have in my collection, was waiting for it to be in the shop, and it is in the shop today. And just to show my stats, how do I do that again? Here we go. 196 victories total. Last season ranked 38-28. Missed the cutoff by, I think, probably 30 points or something. Yeah, so just been, a pretty, basically always in the hunt for the top 50 for these last 2 seasons in particular. So obviously, playing this pretty competitively and having a really good time of it. So what does it look like? And if you're familiar with Papa Beard, who was on the Forge cast with BJ and the Ecclesiarch, pretty much running his build with maybe a couple alterations. I'm not really sure at this point. The big addition was the Librarian. I was actually running just one of the 4 drops that has Vanguard as kind of my extra slot, and then I decided to cut a point blank shot to add a Scout. I've been kind of feeling for a while that Scout actually is a bit better than it looks for a deck that really needs to be curving out always. And 1-drops, as much as I used to love the Octavia Infiltrator, I don't think it's as good as it used to. Well, it's certainly not as good as it used to be. But Scout actually adds a little bit more than you might think. So what is the deck trying to do? And we're going to get into some games just to kind of showcase. And I have a little bit of a tier list on what are some of the toughest matchups. But I'm just going to, maybe I'll do that at some point, but I think let's just look at some of the matchups that I find to be pretty challenging and how that works. What is the deck trying to do? Essentially, every turn, right, you are trying to add a unit to the board and keep the board state clear, right? Your main goal as Space Marines, and you can really start to see their strength in this kind of build, is to basically drop a certain amount of units with flank or whatever else, clear off their units. Maybe you've got some to leave behind, and then sometimes you've got some high roll turns with tactical insight where you can really go off with codex triggers, and it can be pretty insane. Well, I think we're going to see that in one of the games here, and just always applying pressure. But the thing is, you still have to really think about when you use your Warlord's health, Uriel in this case, how are you using it? It can't be just to kind of mindlessly bash your opponent or their units. You really do need to think about when you're trading off your health, because you are a 35 health Warlord, and you're going to fight a lot, and we're going to look at 3 Warlords that have 40 health. and how do you kind of manage your life total with that. And I think there are other ways to build this deck, but currently this is what we're rolling with as of today. But if you wanted to just go based off of my build prior, especially if you don't have Librarian, I'll just show you what I had instead, just so I don't forget. I had one Honor Guard in over Librarian, and then I had only one Scout, and I had 2 point-blank shots. So if you want to change that around, you can. But just to talk about the deck in a little bit more detail, I won't spend too much time. I think what makes Space Marines really potent are these 2/3 drops, Inceptor and Stern Guard Sergeant. Inceptor is just a really, really efficient unit, and almost always is 2-for-1-ing, if not a little more so. But it's almost always going to 2-for-1, and that's excellent on 3. Stern Guard often kind of does a similar impression, and these pressure your opponent very early on to start getting proactive and putting units on the board to try and counteract what you're doing. Some of the big highlights, I mean, just to talk about some of the legendary cards, Humanity Shield is a must. If I had to have a legendary card in this deck, it's Humanity Shield. I would have it over the Librarian. The fact that this card essentially buys you 2 turns, right? The turn you use it, you save some health and just keep going forward. And it prevents your opponent from killing you. Therefore, you can set up a second turn of Codex triggers or whatever you need to close out the game. It's extremely, extremely important in so many matchups, and we'll see it today, that the entire way that you can play this deck, like hyper aggressively, as soon as you see this card in your hand, you really get licensed to just go throw everything at your opponent in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you didn't have the card. So Humanity Shield is great. Librarian, when they changed it, right, it used to just be Codex draw card. Not good enough, because this thing is, I feel like every time this gets played against me, especially in the mirror match, like it's just immediately dead. But the fact that it does draw a card and shields your Warlord, and our Warlord is in particular very important for this kind of deck, it just does enough work. It's also an odd number card, and I know this is funny maybe to think about, but you really do want to think about odd versus even, right? If you're trying to Codex consistently, you need to make sure that you can, and that's why Scout actually goes up a bit in value, because it's a 1-drop that's totally fine, and the rally gets around Camouflage, so it can target something with Camouflage, which can be a big deal actually. And you can play it on 7 with your, if you've got 2 6-drops in your hand, right? You want to make sure your Calcius gets your Codex trigger, right? Which is one of the best ways to close out the game. So I've actually been really happy with how Scout tends to perform, because Hero's Respite got a buff. It's now only 2 energy to draw 2, and you really don't struggle to run, you don't really run out of cards in this deck. I'll say my last kind of noteworthy change, because there's a bunch of stuff I could talk about, and then we'd be here till the sun comes up tomorrow. I changed to 1 Storm Raven, and my reasoning for that, even though I think this has been a staple 2 of in pretty much every Ultramarine deck, is I just don't think the card is that great right now. Maybe if I was seeing only Scarab builds, only go wide Orc builds, I guess I would consider it more, and it's still totally serviceable as a card. I just found whenever I drew the second copy of this, it was bad. First copy, fine. Second copy, really, really diminishing returns. And yes, you're trying to burn your opponent out, but 4 for 2 damage is actually quite a lot when we've got a passive that's 2 for 1 damage, and we have other cheaper things that deal just as much damage. So if you have not tried, and if you've been really spending as much time as I have on Ultramarines and tweaking Uriel, I would encourage you to try 1 Storm Raven, because I really don't find that you need the second one. So this is the build. Obviously, we're not going to get to see how Librarian plays as much in these videos, because we're going to go over some matchups, but I think you'll be able to get a sense of the deck. So what are we going to do? We're going to feature the new battle log system. And I've got some of my pins here. So excuse my scrolling really quick, but I think this week, or what was this? Was this yesterday? I don't know how it tracks it, but yeah, we pretty much climbed streak to 3,200 without, I don't know, without a ton of issue, I guess, right? We're at 32. I think it climbed from 26 or 27 yesterday or the day before, and it was pretty smooth sailing. So let's how do I want to do this? All right, let's talk about a matchup that I honestly feel pretty great about, which is into Abbadon. And I played against God Mark 19 quite a lot. We actually played a lot the other night. So let's hold here for a sec. So we're playing against Abbadon. What are Abbadon's strengths? He's one of the few warlord. Is he the no? The Imotekh heals himself too, but healing 2 health really bad for you because it's one of the ways to really mess up your math playing this deck to be able to close out the game. So what do you have to do? You have to be pressuring Abbadon. You're going to be trading your health generally pretty aggressively, even when they're ahead on health, unless the board state is really terrible. Oops. Let's go back. I want to talk about the mulligan as well. I didn't realize. Is there a way to pause this? Are we paused? I think we're paused. Okay. Sorry, this is my first time using this. Very excited. So this was one of my last games last night, actually. So what do we need to be doing? We need to be consistently pressuring Abbadon's life total to the point where we can close out the game. That's essentially your game plan. So I look at this hand and I go, although I love Inspired Retribution in this matchup, wow, it's really not going to let me pause, huh? Okay. I ship these back mainly because I want to... Is this really... How do I pause? Okay, am I paused now? It's so funny. I guess it won't let me pause in the hand making face. Okay, sorry. Really quickly, basically you want to keep proactive cards. You want to keep proactive units. That's what you want to keep in this matchup, right? So I was happy to keep Judiciary. I was fine to keep one of the respites. Unfortunately, we draw a second one. And we ship back Point Blank because, again, I'd kind of rather see removal later. I just want to be developing first, right? It's also kind of how Swarmlord operates. You want to be developing your units first, get your stratagems later. So that's kind of the principle of the matchup. Respite, keeping 1 is fine, right? It's going to allow me to maybe see some more cards so that I can have a bit of options in pressuring. And so I'm really happy to see the Inceptor here and the Impulsor that we draw for our turn. Because Inceptor is just... if you play this deck a lot, you're going to see this unit is just really good and does a ton of work. And so we'll kind of let it roll, and I'll pause it as we go along. But we're just going to fire that off first, see more cards, kind of decide how we want to develop. And we're going to hit. Pretty much in this game state, whenever there's no units on the board, I'm hitting. That's kind of like a decent rule of thumb for playing into Abbadon, because the later the game goes, the better advantage I feel that they have, and they can turn things around if they just get a nice high roll on one of their armored units that we can't interact with because of camouflage. The game is pretty much over, so you need to be pressuring. So next turn we're kind of thinking about our hand, right, and we're pretty much just going to run out the Inceptor. Even though there isn't a target to kill, we're just going to plop it on the board and swing in and just start making it so they got to start answering things, right? This is going to trade at least 3 damage on this Warlord unless they have something that can immediately kill it. Not terribly happy to see the point blanks this early, but I think they end up coming in handy here to be able to clear the Legionary. And just another rule of thumb against Chaos, I would say for honestly any deck, you have to clear their units, right? If you leave their units on their board, you're making a mistake, because all of their power, right, and specifically Abbadon with this ability, is being able to give just a lot of these dark packs to their units. So if you're not constantly thinking about how am I clearing their unit, then you're not playing against Chaos properly. So we're going to use the 2 damage so that this still lives, right? We just trade there. And then we're going to use that point blank to draw a card. And then I think it's either Hero's Respite or deal damage. I try to be careful of how many cards I have in my hand. And I think there, although Hero's Respite would have been nice, we're getting closer to hand cap. And you don't want to stop yourself from being able to draw your ephemeral ability, because that's how it works. So here, yeah, so what did this card get to do? It got to allow us to kill one of these, and it dealt 3 damage, right? So that's what the strength of Ultramarines is that they're able to 2-for-1 in a lot of ways, and that's good card advantage, right? Even if you're not drawing as many cards as your opponent, if you're able to trade a Warlord's health and clear units, it's good. And so I am going to do do this to get the full clear here. Right, and just to be efficient, although I could use point blank shot or scout, I'm just going to use the 2 energy that I've got remaining to clear that and deal a damage to Abbadon. So I don't love this board state, right, playing as Ultramarines, right? When I have nothing on board and they have nothing, but it's their turn, so they have priority, you're in a bad spot because you're just gambling that they can't just get a high roll, dark pact, or I keep wanting to call them Mark of Chaos because that's what they used to be called. They could just drop a unit and put some buffs on it and we might be behind. So being in this kind of state is pretty scary against Abbadon, right? All right, so they're just going to drop Ukris. They're ahead on health, so they're going to trade. I do think that most of the time in this matchup, I don't think you need to trade your health as Abbadon. I think you can, unless you're very far ahead, I think you can just hold it because I can do so much burn, and we'll see that later. And Abbadon is a matchup, I'll just say, like, I'm very accustomed to playing, so I feel like it's totally fine. And I have a pretty high win rate specifically against Abbadon. But it's not a free matchup. It's definitely kind of in that middle tier of, like, I'm okay seeing it, but it's not a guaranteed win by any stretch. So here, of course, just to not move past that, we use the Sergeant to help clear off Luravine, because if that thing connects, we're going to die. And then we deal with one of the better units that they have, which is the Venom Crawler. And from here, basically, I'm like, please don't have camouflage for the Venom Crawler, right? Like, let me have something that can clear that off, because as soon as that thing just sits on the board, we're going to lose the game. So all I'm thinking about here is, how do I deal with this unit? I've got no Inspired Retribution, right? And I've got a bunch of cards in hand, so I have a ton of options. But the first thing I'm basically going to immediately think about is, I can't take this damage, and I need to find a way to deal with this. So it pretty much has to be Judiciar into, Master of the Fleet, right? Get my Codex trigger, and then guarantee the stun with Tactical Insight if I miss, right? And that buys me essentially a turn to hopefully be able to deal with this Venom Crawler. I'm down 9 life now. We are very behind, and this is bad. This is a really bad situation to be in. But this is how you can kind of use your Codex triggers in certain spots to get ahead, or like really come back. Also, as we can see, we got to use our our card draw to hit the Retribution, right? And I'm not going to use the Tactical Insight because I already got the stun, and I can save it for Calcius to deal potentially 6 damage to the face out of nowhere, right? So I could have stunned here as well to try and guarantee that this won't die. But, as you might know against Chaos, they have tons of ways of putting flankers on the board and interacting, and that's pretty much exactly what's going to happen here. So Possessed Champion is just going to trade straight up, which in a lot of ways is okay, because we got to buy the turn. And now I'm praying that this is not camouflage, right? Because if it is, we have no way to clear this. And thankfully, it is not. So we're going to have to, there is no question here, let me pause for a second, that we have to Retribution this. This cannot stay on the board. We will lose the game. And then we see the best card we kind of want to see, especially at this time in the matchup, Humanity Shield. So now, any turn where I think there is a pretty high likelihood I'm going to die, I can utilize this to buy myself an extra turn. So, first things first, we got a Retribution, the Venom Crawler. And then we've got 3 left, so we're probably just going to play out the Sturm Guard Sergeant. There are a lot of options here. The other option could have been Tactical Insight up to 5 to play Apothecary. Oh, I forgot. I switched this in over the 4-drop Vanguard. I forgot to say. I was testing that out yesterday. It seemed fine. I could have ran out the Impulsor, but I don't love going wide against Chaos because A, they have the Traitorous Hate, deal 2 damage to everything, and they've also got the spawns. So whenever I have the option between deploying a bunch of units and deploying like 1 or 2 units, I usually go for the latter, like the less units, because then they don't get as much advantage from the spawns or from the other flankers. And you'll notice here, like, I've stopped attacking, right? I'm super far behind. There's no reason for me to be trading health like that. Right, another good unit to drop, Bringer of Decay. Again, hoping I can interact with this and that There isn't, you know, I'm not going to get blocked from doing that. So now I got to figure out how am I going to clear this off, right? So here I basically make the decision, okay, I don't think there's any way to guarantee killing this. Probably the best thing I could do is play Polixis, play Sergeant, and play Scout and Tactical Insight and try and gain 4 health and get 2 damage procs. Maybe plus Master of the Fleet and see if we can clear this. And I believe that is exactly what happens. But it is RNG, right? I've only got a 50-50 here. But I'm going to aim the damage here as well just to try and guarantee that we're going to hit it. So we gain a little bit of life and we get the first damage proc. So that's good news, right? At the very least, we can clear this with our Warlord if we miss. But now we're going to go for Codex again. And there it is. I can actually just clear it with point blank, of course. Guarantee the 2 damage here. Now we're up 2 life and we've got a board, so we're going to hit. So a really big turn for us, right? We were able to get, although multiple units will probably die to spawns, we're not only able to efficiently clear this without trading our health. Now they have to clear Polixis and ideally Sergeant, right? And then we have a bunch of damage in our hand, right? We've got potentially 3, 4, 5, right? And we've also got the Humanity Shield. So this is the ideal spot for a round over time. And it's at this point that definitely the game gets a bit harder. But Venom Crawler is a pretty nice one to have. And there's the Spawndom, which is rough. And they're going to be able to clear out pretty much everything here, I think. Yep, and then they throw the mark on the Venom Crawler. I think it could be a lot of things. You could also just buff your health here. But it's probably best to just make sure that this unit is able to keep going. So they aren't able to clear every unit here. They actually don't have a way to clear Sternguard Sergeant if they want to get rid of the Apothecary. So that's good news for us, right? And we've got the Humanity Shield, so we know if we got to play it this turn, then we're going to play it. So another thing I'm thinking about is Calcius plus Death from Above is 7 unanswerable damage, right? So I can deal 7, get them to 6, right? And then 3, 4, 5. And if the Sternguard hits here, we win. But there's no reason to gamble on that, right? So I can just do Master of the Fleet to deal an additional damage. And then I can Humanity Shield. We get the Calcius trigger going to 9. We're hoping Sternguard is going to hit here, and it does. We're going to get that 3, and we're going to guarantee the 2 here. And I think I trade in Sternguard as well to guarantee the 3. Yeah. So that they're, even if they heal up to 4, we've got Death from Above. So this is just a pretty optimal board state. They are going to heal to 4. But we've got 4, 5, 6, 7 potential damage to the face in our hand. And that's pretty much how you want to play it out, right? Is just pressuring, and then there's kind of like a turning point, which we had on 9 energy. And then we were able to deal a bunch of damage and just guarantee the win here with Death from Above. And that's how you do that, folks. Oh, whoops. I thought that was going to get me out. See, I still haven't used this very much. Okay. So that's the Abbadon matchup, just to kind of speed through it and not take up too much time. So really great player, Godmark. We play against each other all the time, and we were able to really, I think, kind of set up the game in a helpful way. So now let's talk about what I would say are the 2 worst matchups in Imotekh and Swarmlord. So let's get into the Imotekh game. Imotekh is just, one of the best kind of control strategies out there. And just to take a look at this hand, again, I'm going to try pressuring them. So I'm pretty happy to keep 2, 5, 6 here, but ship back a Firstborn. Okay, and then we hit the Impulsor. So against this deck, pretty similar, I would say, to Abbadon, is that you pretty much always have to be pressuring. Even if you're getting behind on life, you have to be able to overcome the fact that they will just drop a Tomb World on turn 8, right? That's what you should be thinking. They're going to Tomb World on turn 8. How do I make sure that they die on 9 energy, right? So that's how you got to play this matchup. So we're going to hit face here. This guy's going to die Firstborn, but it soaks kind of a turn, right? They can Lord of the Storm here. They gain a health, but then they have to trade 1 health to kill it. And they're not developing, right? And I'm kind of sitting here thinking to myself, this is not a good board state, right? I really would love a 3-drop. I don't get it. I don't even have a 4-drop. So the fact that I'm not developing here at all, again, pretty bad start. Because if you're not coming out the gate as Uriel, you're behind. And it's going to be really hard into some of these hardest matchups to really close it out. And I'll definitely show you guys, videos of losses as well. But today I figured I'd just show some really good games of some of the toughest matchups. Abbadon I would put kind of in the middle tier, and then Imotekh and Swarmlord I would put as the hardest ones. So we're going to fish for some cards here. We've got double tactical insight. So we know at some point we're going to be able to really turn on the gas. And it's next turn that I choose to just kind of do as much as I can, knowing, I will say, that they can have the deal 2 to 3 damage to everything on the board on 5 energy. Because you always want to be thinking about how does your opponent play out the matchup. And so going wide against Swarmlord against Imotekh is not necessarily the greatest idea. But it's kind of here where I'm like, all right, well, double stunning doesn't do anything, which you just hear. And Codexing Chaplain also doesn't do anything. The only thing that's really going to be kind of a high roll is the Impulsor. And so I'll let this turn play out. And that's pretty much exactly what we do. We're just going to go as hard as we can with trying to clear this because they had nothing to play, or they're able to get it back with Reconstitution Protocol. Either way, we want to clear this. Because if they play a flanker and kill it, and then they're able to use the stratagem, that's pretty bad. So we then deploy Firstborn, and now we guarantee that we're able to take this out between Firstborn and our Master of the Fleet. So this is exactly what we do. So we get 2 Codex triggers for this guy and 3 for the Impulsor, which is pretty nasty. And here, basically, even if they have the Scythe Assault, right, it's possible that some of these live, right? And it's a big problem. But they drop Lich Guard, which is fine, because we're going to be able to poke this down, especially because we've got Sergeant, which is probably the best card into it. And Sergeant is just kind of a card you're always happy to see. We even get the 1 damage here to make it even easier to clear. And I would say this is one of the most high roll games I've had into Imotekh, but it's not unwinnable for them. There are a lot of ways they can clear out these units, and you'll see they'll be able to clear out quite a few. So just between Firstborn and Sergeant, we're able to clear that and 1 other attack, and we're just going to have everyone else go face, because even if they, they're going to die to Scythe Assault, let's get all of our damage in the face as possible, and now we're ahead on life, right? And whenever we're ahead on life, we are happy as Ultramarines. And there's the Scythe Assault, right? It's a turn late, so we were able to poke in quite a lot of damage, and they're able to clear basically our entire board, right? But we got a ton of damage out of it, and a good amount of tempo, and now we've got a great turn with Chaplain plus Stern Guard. So we're going to get the double Codex triggers this turn and trade as much possible damage here, right? We guarantee the 2, which you always want to do. You get 6 to the face off of the Sergeant, right? So this has cleared a unit, a very important unit, and dealt 6 damage, right? So this is exactly how you want this to play out. And even though with the Plasmancer they're able to do quite a lot here, they're also just so far behind on life at this point. And we have so much burn in this deck, right? That's why you want to go so hard on their life total, is because our reach is actually pretty large. One combo, just to talk about it for a second, is if you've got Calcius plus Death from Above plus Tactical Insight, I think that's what, it's 11 damage plus your Ephemeral card, right? So I would say pretty much whenever a Warlord is in the teens in terms of health, you are able to threaten lethal pretty easily. So that's why you want to be just plugging away, right? And even though they're able to clear off a lot of stuff here, they're at 7, right? So we've got lethal in our hand, 3 from Calcius, 2 from Blank Shot, 2 from our Warlord. And takes me a second. It's actually faster in the playback to realize that, and that's lethal. So that's exactly how you want to kind of close out the game there. All right. Yes, victory, victory. Now, I've saved the best for last here, folks, and that is what I think is the hardest matchup because I have the worst win rate against it, and that is going to be Swarmlord. We actually have a loss to it yesterday here, which was unfortunate. But we did manage to beat it in what was actually a really rough start against Abbadon, who's a top 50 player. So I just kind of want to, and I'm going to talk about why this. Okay, so again, we just want units. We don't want tactical insight now. I used to keep this card, but I just feel better and better about drawing it later. Again, you need to be developing. So 4, 5, 6, great. Let's hope we draw a 3-drop. Okay, we didn't. And we're going first, so that's not good because we don't have our defense card. Now, why is Swarmlord the worst matchup? It's an aggressive warlord that can outpace you pretty easily, that has some seriously crazy end game potential that you can't interact with. If you think playing against Chaos is hard, right, where they've got camouflage and they can put Vanguard on multiple things and all that stuff, just think about if they also had stealth. So the fact that you can't interact with stealth at all, stratagem or flank unit, means that you just have to have the right cards at the right time, especially Primaris. It's very important in this matchup that you can stun through stealth, right? To be able to have a fighting chance. And this is a matchup where we are not the aggressor, right? We're the aggressor against Abbadon. We're the aggressor against Imotekh. We are not the aggressor against Swarmlord. We have to play this very precisely. And I've really tried out the idea of always attacking, only attacking at certain points. I would encourage you, if you've been struggling with this matchup, to think about it this way of, unless you are ahead on board, clearly, or you have the ability to close out the game very soon, you should not be trading your health. This thing will just beat you down in the matchup very easily, and I really feel that it's the hardest matchup to win. So we're just going to use our Master of the Fleet here, and we're going to pass the turn. We're not going to trade health here, right? Because we're already behind when they make this attack. So just doing the Master of the Fleet keeps things. And there is the instant biomorphologies that was buffed, right, to 2. This is such a perfect card, and I'll probably try out some Swarmlords soon to show you guys. It's exactly what you want to do on 2 energy. They're not going to be developing until at the earliest 3 energy with we'll see the next card. And so it's perfect on turn 2. You just get to buff whatever you have in your hand. It really is. People were running it on 3 energy in the deck anyway, but now it's even better. So I'm looking at this hand, and let me tell you, I am not happy. No 3-drop, no 2-drop. Not a good start. And it's funny that a lot of these games I'm showcasing today, I would say, have pretty bad draws. So when you draw well, it's even easier. And there is the first unit we got to worry about, Gene Stealer. So it's going to guarantee that they have another one next turn, and it has 5 health because they got +2 health to all units in their hand for biomorphology. That is huge. Giving health to your Tyranids, as for any Tyranid player knows, that's such a big resource. So the fact that it makes it harder to clear, and this is a pretty telegraphed turn, right? We're just going to play our 4-drop. There's not much else we can do. And digestion pool, and I'm just sitting here thinking, well, see, it's our game to lose, so we'll see what our opponent does. And they've got the Carnifex cheapened by going second and being able to clear this even more efficiently and being able to leave the Gene Stealer on the board for me to have to deal with. And both of these units are hard to clear. So this is just such a bad spot to be in. Pretty much have no choice but to consider, well, actually we do have a choice, right? We could consider Judiciar to get a double stun, but that's not going to guarantee that it lives because they can just put the second Gene Stealer on here, or the third, right? Because this is living 2 turns. So in my head, I basically say we have to clear the Gene Stealer. This thing is going to punch us in the face for potentially 10 at some point if we don't start clearing this out. So It's a really close choice, though. I mean, you could maybe high roll the Judiciary and get the stun on both here, and that buys you some time, but I opt to go for the Inceptor to guarantee clearing this, and then hoping that they don't have a good way to trade back on the Inceptor, right? Because this is kind of this card is such a crucial tool in this matchup. They don't have a good way to clear this because its range is really good and its health is higher. Swarmlord can't really do much in the range department, so that's why we can kind of afford to do this, right? And I can clear for free without taking any damage, and then we can use Master of the Fleet to poke 1 damage on the armor unit with current effects. And if you don't know, you always take armor with this. There's pretty much no reason to take anything else. And it's a house of a unit. It's really, really good for a common card. And then they drop Psychophage, and I'm just like, oh god, I have to make sure I can clear as much as possible. Especially in this matchup, kind of like Chaos, right? You have to be clearing their units or you will lose. So I'm thinking about how to do that. Obviously, we've got Master of the Fleet to start on that. And I kind of quickly identify, although you don't use Tactical Insight like this, that I basically get a free 1 damage on everything, and then Tactical Insight back up to 6 to play Sergeant, right? So you do want to think about, like, yes, of course, getting multiple triggers of Codex off of Tactical Insight is kind of how the card is designed, but it's also a way to buy you 2 free energy, right? So, and in this case, I don't really care about playing Calcius. Sure, it could threaten them a bit, but they're definitely going to be able to clear this pretty easily. And if this thing stays on the board, they just get Feeding Frenzy, which is really nasty. And so the best way is just to get out my Sergeant, which they're also going to have a really bad time of dealing with. The 6 health and the 5 ranged attack. Both Inceptors are super, super crucial for this matchup, and you should always keep. And that's what I'm going to do. And it's going to help me clear out this Psychophage, which is definitely a pretty annoying threat. And although I miss out on the Insight, trigger from potentially stunning earlier or whatever else, it's going to allow me to trade some health here and keep the board clear, right? You do want to think about 2 health, though, because they have the ability to deal 2 damage to everything and heal up. So that is something I'm thinking about. And there's the second Gene Stealer. So we know that they're, and then they're able to buff this, and we can't interact with this, right? That's why stealth is so rough. But in a miraculous draw, we hit our Humanity Shield, and this, like I said, changes the entire landscape of the matchup, because you having this card is just going to allow you to be much more aggressive than you normally would have, right? And so we're on 7 here. And I'm just going to opt for the Judiciary and hope that we spike the hit on the Gene Stealer, right, to buy us some time. And I forget if we do or not. And we do, yeah. So we get the 50-50. And I'm basically saying, oh, I could keep this to clear a unit, but if they deal 2 damage to everything, no, I'm losing a huge amount of pressure. So I trade 5 into the Swarmlord, and it still lives, right, because it's only got 1 ranged. And then I say, okay, this is the time now. I've got the Humanity Shield as well in my hand. Turn on the gas, and for the first time, I think, in like this whole matchup, I use a ranged attack against the Swarmlord. And so this is essentially where I'm trying to turn the game around in our favor at this point, right? We're no longer trying to keep up. And they actually have a great turn here with Rapacious Hunger. They're able to kill both of our units and gain 4 health. Gain 1 health on the Gene Stealer, and they're able to, this is a great follow-up turn for them. And then they're able to re-give stealth. So again, I can't interact with these, which is really, really bad, because we know that there's at least 2 more Gene Stealers they can add on to this. So it's really important that you're keeping track of what's going on with a unit like Gene Stealer, right? So we know that they have 1 in their hand, and they're going to guarantee the second one. So they can add 6 power to this next turn, right? And that's why we're going to have to use Humanity Shield this turn, because I have no way to get rid of this. Or wait, is that what I end up doing? I forget. So the other, I debated, right? So I could Storm Raven, and that would clear this, but it wouldn't clear this. There's just no way for me to clear Gene Stealer. So we're just going to drop the Calcius, and we're going to Humanity Shield, I'm pretty sure. And then I'm going to just hit for 2 because we've got the free damage. We get the 3 damage proc, and now we're ahead on life. And they can't interact with us on probably their most important turn, right? Because otherwise they'd be able to slam double Gene Stealer here and hit us for lethal, I think, or pretty close to it. So they're able to kill Calcius and clear it, unfortunately. And they're able to merge it again, right? So they had minimum 11 damage with this last turn. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, they actually had lethal if we didn't do what we did. And so now I say to myself, how do we win this game? Right, because they've again had a really great turn. But we do have the second Sergeant to clear out the Gene Stealer, which is massive. Right, this thing has so much health already. And then we master the fleet. We get to clear off the Neuraloid, which is such a great addition to the deck. Really gives it even more explosive lines of play. And now this is a great board state for us because this is going to be real hard for them to clear. And I'm just kind of hoping they don't have some kind of like nuts turn to kill us. So they do have the Ravenous Hunter and Bounding Leap, which is able to do quite a bit of work here, right? But they're going to have to trade their health in order to do that. And so all we got to do is just guarantee enough health, and they're at 4, right? So we've got the Storm Raven plus our attack. So even with us being able to turn this game around, and we had a pretty rough start, the game is extremely close, right? So that's why I say this matchup is just the hardest matchup. And let me know what you think in the comments if you've been playing a lot of this, you know, whether you've been playing Ultramarines or Space Marines or what have you. But I just think that those are some of the toughest matchups. Maybe, if you guys want, I can go through a matchup tier list, and I could go through some other matchups and do an even deeper dive. But I hope today at least gave you some deck building ideas for Uriel. Again, I just want to sell you on aggro Space Marines. I really don't think going mid-range or control is the way anymore. And just to show some of these games and these matchups so it helps you kind of think about how you want to play. And I really think this is a great choice, not just for climbing, but for in general. And I will say, Balduco, who's a really well-known player on the ladder, I think always like top 5 at the minimum, is also playing this deck. We played a couple matches last night. I think I went 1-1 against them. But give it a shot. Let me know what you think, and I will try and do some more content with this coming up. And got the Orcs coming. Should be exciting. And other than that, I will try and catch you guys not too far in the distant future. Thanks for tuning in.